So we have 11 games tonight on the NHL schedule. It means 22 teams playing hockey. So Anaheim's in Philly, and this is a matchup where Anaheim can show themselves to be back in the running, and back in the race. Anaheim has a couple of key guys coming back tonight. So I know Lindholm's coming back. Getzlaf apparently as well. At least that's what I read. Pretty sure that's what I read. And Anaheim's already got a 500 record, so I would not be surprised to them going to beat Philly. And yet the Flyers have been playing really, really well, even in the games where they got shut out. So out of their 3 losses, 2 of them were by shutout against Nashville and against the Kings. They played really well in those games. So it's not a matter of them playing badly when they lose, which is, something I'm watching. The Islanders are at home to Arizona, so the Islanders can really make hay tonight. And for Arizona, at 0-7-1, maybe it's the best thing for them to be on the road. 8 losses in a row is just brutal. As I said after their last loss, we're going to start talking about the worst starts in NHL history pretty quick here, because they're off on one. This is one of the worst starts that I've seen, and it's just sad because it's not like they're getting blown out. It's just they're just not playing well, and they're just behind the play just a little bit. But because they're already 7 games below 500, the idea of at this point, okay, well, they'll turn it around. It would be so difficult for them to turn around. It would be such a huge winning streak. It would have to be such a great winning percentage they'd have to have from here. And it's a roster of players that haven't shown that before. I also agree. There was a comment on the Everything is Wrong with the Coyotes video where somebody had said that Jason Chayka got rid of too many veterans and put too many young guys in. Absolutely. This is the problem with throwing the young guys to the Wolves. That's why they call it throwing them to the Wolves, because NHL players, NHL teams are merciless. It's not like it's their job to make you feel good about yourself as a kid. No, their job is to go out and win the games. So that's what Arizona's finding out. The big game, and I'm going to be watching this one tonight, is the Edmonton Oilers in Pittsburgh against the Penguins. So here we have Connor McDavid, who scored a hat trick his first night. Everybody talked about how he might score 100 goals. He hasn't had a goal since then. It's been 6 games. Up against Sidney Crosby and the Penguins. The Penguins have looked human. Although, again, I think Niemi dragged their record down somewhat. So, this is going to be a tough one to watch in terms of figuring out who's going to beat who. And the honest answer is it would be easy to say Pittsburgh. And I agree with people saying Edmonton looks slow. That outside of Connor McDavid's blazing speed, they've looked slow. However, Caggiula and Draisaitl, if they're both in the lineup tonight, that changes the game completely. And we could see an explosive game for the Oilers, which is bad news for Pittsburgh defense and goaltending. And their defense has been, to some extent, because Niemi was so awful, it sort of hides the fact that Pittsburgh's defense hasn't been great either. But we'll see how it turns out for them tonight. Tampa's in Carolina. If you're a Carolina fan and you're scared, as one comment was made on a recent video, you should be concerned with Tampa coming in. But at the same time, I think Carolina's played a very good game. Their record isn't great, but they had a decent road trip. And Carolina's still in a position where they've played less games than most anybody else. If you win those games in hand, then you have a good shot at making, headway in your division. The trick is, anytime a team has games in hand and they say, well, this team's 3 points back, but they've got 4 games in hand. Yeah, but they have to win those games. So unless they've shown that they can win those games in hand don't really mean anything. They're points that you can get, not points that the NHL is going to hand you. Detroit's in Buffalo in a matchup between 2 struggling teams. The 5-2 Buffalo Sabres against a Detroit team that's lost 4 in a row. The loss at home against Vancouver had to be humiliating. And even though the tickets may be getting sold, so Little Caesars Arena apparently was a sellout against Vancouver, the arena's half empty. I think something the NHL needs to look at, and this is, I think, happening in a lot of areas, likely not just in hockey, but the optics of a half empty or 3/4 full arena, even if those tickets are sold. So even if somebody sold those tickets or somebody bought those tickets and they didn't show up, just the optics of all those front row seats being empty, especially when you've got like in Detroit or Vancouver, those seats are red. I mean, it's not like they're black and they fade into the background. They stick out like a sore thumb. It just looks bad. Especially when you then change the channel to Chicago and it's a huge arena. And I know the Blackhawks are, a good team and big city and very successful franchise, and fans are going to pay for the tickets, and comparing them to Detroit's not fair. My point is, find a way to get somebody into those seats. If nobody shows up by the third period, tell people in the upper area, say, look, we had a draw. Go grab a seat down in the bottom. Like something. Let people move down. In wrestling, famously, if tickets don't sell, they just basically tarp off a huge section of the audience to make sure the camera doesn't show it, and they cram people into one part of the arena so that it looks like it's really full. The NHL is just because optics look not fun right now. And I feel bad for fans that are sitting way up there who were really cheering really loud, and they really should be down front. They really should be down front, cheering down front. And we'll see how it works out between them and Buffalo tonight. Because if Detroit loses tonight, then attendance in Detroit's not going to get any better. And for Buffalo, Jack Eichel's playing well. There's signs of Buffalo turning it around. This is when Buffalo needs to get on a run. Can't fall to 2-6-2 in your first 10. Speaking of falling, the Florida Panthers are facing the Montreal Canadiens in a matchup between two teams that haven't had the starts that they wanted to. Now, Florida looks like they might be on the verge of turning it around. James Reimer had a very good game, and they're in Montreal against a Canadiens team that hasn't won since their first game. And that was a shootout. They haven't won a game in regulation. They haven't won a game in overtime. They have a 0 there. So they've lost 7 in a row, and they're at home against a Panthers team that should be hungry, young, and fast. Look for Pacioretty, though, to have a good game. He's way overdue for a good game. And after what he said to the media, which was, how can I tell these guys to play better when I'm the worst one on the ice? Perfect thing to say. Now go out there and prove you're not the worst one on the ice and win some games. So we'll see what happens. For the Kings, they're in Ottawa. And so this is a matchup where the Kings have just lost their first regulation game. Now they got to go to Ottawa. The Senators are coming off that win against Toronto 6-3. High confidence for Ottawa. For LA, it's not like they didn't show up against Toronto. It was a very good game. It was a 1-goal loss for the Kings. But for Ottawa, this is a big game too, because after beating Toronto, they need to get on a bit of a roll. And the Kings, at the same time, need to avoid getting on a roll the wrong way. So that first loss, you got to bounce back, you got to brush it off, and you got to win that next game. So we'll see what happens between those two. For the Flames, the 4-4 Flames are in Nashville. Now, Glenn Gulletson has been vocal about how he doesn't feel like his team's playing the right game, and has said so after a win as well. So he hasn't been happy with the way his team's been playing. Now, with Jágr out, I'm going to be honest, Jágr hasn't had the effect for Calgary that I had anticipated. He really hasn't. And with Mark Jankowski being called up and taking a spot in the lineup, Jankowski will be faster, younger, hungrier. And I'm starting to wonder how long the marriage between Jágr and the Flames is going to last. Because if he's not producing, and if the record is poor, and if Jankowski proves that he can play, this is part of the reason why when Sam Bennett was getting ready to hold out, I'm like, why is Sam Bennett going to hold out? And look at Bennett right now. No points. Bennett, if Jankowski plays well, let's say Jankowski plays well and Jágr comes back and Gulletson and Tree Living say, okay, we want Jágr in the lineup. What if Bennett's the one that gets sent back to the American League? What if it's Bennett that's sent down to Stockton? And honestly, if Jankowski plays well, I don't see any reason not to send Bennett down. So we'll see what happens. Or in the case of Jágr, it could be him that's on the way out. And that would be sad. But there's a visible difference in terms of his speed with his line mates. Like when people say, oh, he'll be on a line with Johnny Gaudreau, my first thought is, now Gaudreau's got to hold up for Jágr, which could drag his game down. That's, something that I don't think you want to mess with. For Vancouver, they're in Minnesota, and Minnesota traditionally is a dead zone for Vancouver. Vancouver doesn't usually play very well against the Minnesota Wild, the style of hockey played by the Wild. If the Canucks are a run and gun style, usually at that point, Minnesota's a a trapping team, and if Vancouver's a team that can't score goals, then Minnesota's run and gun and beats the hell out of them. I don't anticipate a win for the Canucks here. I know they're coming in with 2 wins in a row, but this is prime territory for Minnesota to shut the Canucks out. This is usually where a shutout will take place. Dallas. Dallas has won 4 in a row. They're in Colorado. Colorado's lost 3 in a row. So anytime that 2 streaking teams meet each other, my bet is on those streaks reversing. So my bet would be that Colorado would come out, play a good game, and Dallas would have somewhat of a drop in terms of their play and in terms of their results. And that's not as an insult to Dallas. It's just the law of averages. Colorado is due to win 1. Dallas is due to lose 1, and they're against each other. But the big one. So I'm watching Pittsburgh and Edmonton, and I'll watch that game, and it'll be great. But the big one starts at 7 o'clock tonight. And it's the Vegas Golden Knights at home against the Chicago Blackhawks. So there's been plenty of people saying Vegas is playing great. They're one of the best teams in the league. And there's others saying, well, they haven't played anybody, and once Chicago plays them, Chicago's going to beat the hell out of them. So this is a big game for Vegas. And it's honestly a big game for Chicago, too. Chicago can't afford to be one of those win 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 1, because somebody in their division is going to go on a run. And whether it's Nashville or it's St. Louis, somebody's going to go on a nice long run here. So you can't be that team that's giving up points. I don't anticipate Vegas winning this game, but here's the thing. So you got Oscar Dansk. You got Maxime Legacy as the goaltenders in Vegas. No one's anticipating them being any good, but nobody anticipated Vegas being any good. And for Chicago, this is a team that some people said was going to drop like a rock, and some said was still going to contend, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of in-between with that. I personally believe in the Blackhawks, and I don't say that because I'm a huge fan of the Blackhawks. It's just they've won 3 Stanley Cups, and they've got pieces back that were there the last time they won a Stanley Cup. So my guess is they come out tonight, they have a really good game. But we'll see. And that's the beauty of these games. Even when I sit here and I do this, we do all these previews, and we can all talk back and forth about who should win. When the games are played, usually the results are completely different. So let me know who you got tonight. Let me know which game you're going to be watching. And I guess the big question is, can Raanta make a save? Isn't that really the question? It's going to be fun for Arizona when Raanta comes back. And I'm saying that without any joking around or any kind of sarcasm, because once Arizona's got all of its starters in there, not just up front and on the blue line, but in net as well, see what kind of team they are, and then see just how much of a teardown needs to be done. And here's the problem. One last Phoenix thing. Arizona, Phoenix. Let's say Jason Chayka's got to burn it. How do you burn it? What veterans are there right now in Arizona to trade out and burn it? They're not trading OEL. So before you put Oliver Ekman-Larsson in the comment section, they're not trading him. They already burned it to the ground. They already traded out anybody they could. Tobias Reeder, Martinook. I mean, you don't have a lot to trade out. Arizona's not dealing from a point of strength either. So as much as I was all doom and gloom and dark and horrible about this team before the season started, it could be Arizona that's really doom and gloom for a while. Let me know what you guys think. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.